Okay.
Hello, everyone. It's Sonia McDonald, and I'm the CEO and founder of Leadership HQ, McDonald Inc., and the Outstanding Leadership Awards. And I've been excited for weeks for this interview. Paul Scurrah, he's the CEO of Pacific National, and he is a person and leader and just great human that I've admired for many, many years. I even wrote about him in my latest book, First Comes Courage. He's got a great section in there about his amazing and courageous leadership, and he's also one of our keynote speakers at the Courage Conference. And welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Sonia. Thanks for having me. And challenging times, but really good to get the chance to talk about leadership and whatever else you want to talk about.
Yes, I've got some great questions, but before we start, I wanted to share a story with you because a few weeks ago, I was speaking at the Brisbane Convention Centre. So they asked me to come and speak, and they were putting together this great EA forum. So they had invited a number of EAs from around Brisbane to this forum, and I got to speak about First Comes Courage. And it was such a great event because I got to also have lunch with all these remarkable leaders and EAs, because I think our EAs are kind of the cornerstone of our organisation, right?
Yeah.
And we're going around talking about their roles and leaders they've worked with and great CEOs. And anyway, I'm really sorry, you're going to have to forgive me. I forgot her name, but she did say that she was your EA. Mm-hmm. And as soon as everyone said that, and she said, I'd noticed that, Paul was speaking at your conference, everyone went silent, and they were like, and obviously it was like this, oh, Paul, wow, Paul Scurrah. And she said, he is amazing. Like, she was like, He is an amazing CEO, an amazing leader. He had built the most incredible culture at Virgin. She just raved, and everyone there was looking at her going, wow, like they were kind of this envious look for them. So I just wanted to tell you the story because it was so nice hearing that.
Caroline, probably.
Yes, it was. I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, no, Caroline's lovely, great EA as well, and just a beautiful person. So great feedback.
She was very much around. You were fantastic connecting with everyone in the organisation, that you were really missed there. She said that you were very missed. Mm-hmm. And it was just really lovely to hear someone comment so wonderfully about a leader. And that's why, I wanted to talk to you today, because I think there is a little bit of negativity when it comes to LinkedIn and social media around leadership. We kind of look at some of our politicians and things, and I think we need to showcase people like you who are out there that really care about this space. So I'd love to, what does leadership mean to you?
Well, personally for me, Sonia, it's everything. It's what I've turned my mind to in terms of what I do, what matters to me. I actually didn't get a degree per se at school, so technically I didn't have either a trade or a degree to fall back on. And very early in my career, particularly it being involved in team sport, one thing that felt right to me was just getting into the space of leading and making sure that people follow. I think leadership is about people following, not you forcing people in a direction. And I think that gets lost on people. But leadership, the old saying is that the fish rots from the head. And it's a negative connotation on leadership. And I think the positive connotation is also true. Great leadership is what can make a good company great. Great leadership is what can make a place an amazing place to be from a cultural point of view, and people jump out of bed to be there every day. And leadership makes a difference in people's lives, not just at work, but at home. And I think that's the most important thing to remember.
Yeah, I think if there's one thing this pandemic has shown us, that it isn't kind of work life, right? It's life. And as a leader, it's really important that we understand that we lead people, and it's about them and their lives, not just at work, right? So
yeah, that's right. I mean, people spend so much time at work that you can impact their life generally and holistically by what happens to them at work, the way they're treated, the way they see us treat other people as well can impact on them. So I think it's very, very important that we know and understand the impact of what we do. The impact both positively and negatively of what we do and say every day.
Yeah, it's very true. You know, our messages and our words and actions can definitely have impact. So it's being really aware of that. So, I mean, looking back on your life, I mean, what events, experiences, or even people made a difference, do you think, to where you are today?
Yeah, I think about this quite a bit actually, and I'm on the record of talking very positively about James Strong. He was, in my view, still one of the very best CEOs I've ever experienced or witnessed, whether I worked with him or not. James was at Australian Airlines when I started out my career, and everyone just admired him. They respected him. He made hard decisions, but even the hard decisions were delivered with compassion and care. And he just had the entire workforce wanting to work for him and following him. So, you know, in the early days, I thought that was great. The atmosphere I worked in there, and remembering that he took over Qantas's CEO role as well, and what he did there was well known. So he's made a big difference to me. I think, without naming names, generally in a sporting sense, there were coaches that I played Australian rules football for many years, and there
Okay.
were coaches that made me feel taller than I am, bigger and stronger and more confident than I am. But there's also coaches, and this is true in business as well, as people who brought the worst out of me, you know, pushed me back into my shell, made me afraid to make mistakes, and it didn't help me. In football, it didn't help me play well, and in work, it didn't help me thrive. Not everyone goes, you know, into their shell when there's fear-based leadership or there's, you know, negativity-based leadership, but I certainly did. That's true of me. And, you know, I know some people thrive in a fear-based culture. But I just, it's, you know, I'm very high on the satisfaction scale when you do, you know, 360 degree.
Yeah.
I've got to really love what I do. I've got to love who I work for, and that makes a big difference. So, uh, so there, James is one that stands out for me, but football coaches do as well. You know, from a safety leadership perspective at Aurizon and QR, Lance Hockridge, and his relentless focus on safety was a real lesson to me as well. So yeah, there's been some really good leaders that I've had the experience to, or the great pleasure of seeing in person. Richard Branson in recent times, you know, he's a true leader because he just creates environment and atmosphere, and he keeps things really simple, which I think is another thing of leadership that people uh, sometimes forget, and they try to overcomplicate things.
Yeah, I think sometimes they do, and it is those people that can make an absolute impact. So it kind of makes you more cognizant around, as a leader, how you're making a difference to others as well. In
Yes.
all due fairness, Paul, I don't really know that many people that thrive in a fear culture. I don't
Yeah.
know.
No.
Yeah.
No, there's not too many, to be honest. Some do. Some go through because, you know, it is maybe the default language they like to speak for whatever reason. But I mean, in sport in particular, and sport and business does replicate itself in many ways. But back in the 80s and 70s and 80s, in team sport, the coaches were fear based. And it's only those players who could actually um, not even thrive, but only those players who could survive in that culture that made it through. And if you just look at sport now, and again, very true of coaching and being a CEO, not every person is the same. You need to actually figure out a way to tailor your message to the different ways it gets received by different personalities.
Right.
So, and you know, take a slightly different style to people on the way that you know you're going to get the best out of them individually.
Yeah, and I think that's why getting to know your people, getting to understand who they are and what motivates them and what they're passionate about as well, is really the
Yes.
key.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, in terms of leadership and why it matters to you and how it plays an important part of your life, did and it's interesting when I talk to people about leadership, they do make it bigger than what it is, right? They do make it about rank and role and title, and
Mm.
therefore they feel that we can all be leaders, right? I mean, how has it made a difference in your life?
Yeah, rank and role and title are more about going up a management hierarchy, not necessarily about leadership. And if you need to fall back on where you sit in the structure or the fact, or you have to remind people you're a CEO, I think that's almost losing the point.
Mm.
So I don't have to. I know this. I've learned this. I've been a CEO multiple times now. I don't have to remind people I am. I don't have to use that as a stick. People know. They know that I'm the CEO. I don't have to rub it in their face. And leadership matters, I think, because it is, more important now that you have a high EQ and making sure, and even if you don't, you've got to develop your EQ. But leadership is a lot about care, and care often, and people have challenged me on that. Care is often about caring enough to give negative feedback, to give really constructive development feedback. I have often had people work for me where I've said, look, this just isn't working the way it needs to. And, I care enough about you to give you this feedback. And often they'll say, well, it must be you because no one else has given me that feedback before. Yeah. And I'll say, well, maybe I didn't care enough to give it to you. And so, I look back on some of the leaders I've had that years ago had the courage to say to me, hey, listen, Paul, this is going well, but you really need to work on this. And I think now, if they didn't tell me that, I wouldn't have developed as well as I feel as I have. So it's very important. So care is super important. And leadership, as I said before, is so important to me because it is what I am. That's what I specialize in. It's what I hang my hat on. But it is what is required to make sure that companies thrive and people's lives are more positive as a result of what I do every day.
Yeah, it's so true what you're saying in terms of that care. I always say to people, you can still be kind and strong as a leader. Like, being kind and caring is actually caring enough because you want to lift people up to do more and learn more. And sometimes that is saying, this is what you need to work on because I actually am invested in your growth because I care about you. And even though some people can find that feedback a little bit hard to hear, if you do it with really caring intent, people are a lot more open to it because they're kind of like, okay. But again, a lot of people find it challenging, right?
Yes. They do. And the real thing that I focus on, particularly at the beginning of any tenure I have as CEO, is making sure that is clear, that people know that care is a big factor, but it has to be wrapped into a whole program about what your intent is. And often that's called, a vision or a purpose. So clarity of purpose is always very important. So let's figure out why we do what we do, why we exist, what sets us apart to other cultures, what are the priorities and what are the behaviours we want. And at Pacific National, we've just finished that exercise actually, and we have, a very clear purpose, which is to deliver what matters for our people, customers, and shareholders. Because often it's really simple, and it forces you to go and find out what matters to those three groups as well. But the simplicity is there. But it's a balancing act being a CEO or a leader, because if you over-index and do everything for one of those groups, it's likely the other two are suffering. So it's a real balancing act in the center of people, customers, and shareholders. And it really often becomes the case where shareholders aren't mentioned at the beginning. And our purpose is actually in part to make sure our shareholders make good returns. But our people must be really happy. Our customers must be really happy. But because of that, you end up knowing that you care enough about the whole picture to say no to one of those groups at a point in time for the greater good. And but clarity of purpose and clarity of intent, and then holding people to account to actually live in that way, is hugely important.
Yeah, it is that clarity. People love clarity, and they want to know like why they do what they do and where they're going as well. They need to. So have you ever had someone care enough to give you not so great feedback that made a difference to you?
Yeah, absolutely, of course. Any
story?
Look, I'm prepared to share it. I mean, I was a confident young man, actually, the feedback was, it's a funny story, but I was asked, and ironic where I ended up, right? But I was working for the merged Australian Airlines and Qantas, and this management role came up in Brisbane. And I was quite up and coming and young, and I'd had some good results on the board. And I got interviewed, and the guy interviewing me, who was going to be my boss if I got the job, asked me where I saw myself going. And I said, I hope to be the CEO one day. And I actually didn't get the job. And the feedback he gave me later is, you cocky little so-and-so. he said, here's the thing, you might have got the job, but your cockiness cost you. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, but it was a lesson in picking your audience. And what I realized I was saying was that I'll jump over you to be your boss one day. And he didn't necessarily like it. So the feedback, I didn't necessarily want to hear it at the time, but you've got to read the play. That's, and whilst I would have preferred a different culture, a different response for, good on you, Paul. That's a great aspiration. And if anyone ever says that to me, I would actually say that is entirely possible. You should believe that. I know that. But I think there is, because everything in business is in between black or white or something in between. And it's more in between than it is white or black, right? So you've got to put a judgment call and you've got to read the play and understand the field you're running onto before you actually decide how you're going to go about it. So I went into that interview with a little bit of confidence and cockiness that misread the audience, and it cost me. Now, it's not to say that anyone should ever just say what the other person wants to hear, but tact and diplomacy is also a very, very good business tool.
Here it is, isn't it? Like thinking about if I say this, what do I think could be? Look, I agree with you. I would be very much absolutely like have the courage, because anything is absolutely possible, right? Like, yes. I believe having that self-belief. And look, funnily enough, obviously, because I'm very passionate about, I'm speaking next week for International Women's Day. And we work with loads and loads of women. We're working across the rail at the moment, which I love. Women tend to not really I'm trying to push them to say stuff like that, to go, I want to sit at the table. Like, they kind of step back a little bit more, I think. They're kind of a bit more, and whereas I really embrace, like what you said, you in the interview, I would have been like, yeah, Paul, like, I'd love you to be CEO. So I get it, but I get reading the audience look, that's really good feedback. It's really good feedback that you kind of understand the intent.
Yeah, but don't be afraid. I would not advocate to anyone to not believe it. I think it's really, so you wouldn't say, I don't think I ever could be the CEO in the meeting. You just believe it and pick the audience and keep it to yourself. But the feedback helped a hell of a lot. As much as I didn't want to hear it, it helped me understand how you navigate through. And it's a series of relationships business, and relationships are always about reading the play on both sides. You can't always have it your own way, and you can't say anything you want and get away with it, or you can't say anything you want without some sort of reaction to it. So it's really, it just taught me to be a bit more tactful and diplomatic, and certainly didn't impact my ability or my desire to be honest at all. The irony is that was Qantas, and I didn't ever become their CEO, but I did become Virgin's CEO at a point in the future. So
I was going to say, looking back, does this person know that you got there?
I'm not sure, but it was a nice feeling to get
there. Yeah. A few people are saying a few comments here around, saying what needs to be said in a manner that is supportive and instructive and meaningful is a real challenge. So thanks, Rosemary. That's a really good feedback. All right, so the next one in terms of courage, around courageous leadership, and obviously you're all about care as well, and that we're really passionate about kindness and care and courage. But what does courage mean to you, like in terms of particularly in the last few years, right? In terms of what you went through, and obviously I wrote about that story in my book around how courageous you were with Virgin, but also in the last few years, like what does courage mean to you?
It means so much. Courage comes with decisiveness in certain ways. The courage to actually make a decision. Is procrastination, I think, is partially linked to a lack of courage. Yeah. And so I think decisiveness is important, and that goes back to other points about simplicity and clarity of message. Courage often gets mistaken for directness or possibly even rudeness, and it's not. It's direct. There's nothing wrong with directness as long as it's respectful and as long as it's kind. And you can deliver whatever message you need to deliver and must deliver to an individual or a group, and do it still with kindness and compassion. So you can terminate someone's career with compassion and kindness. It's not about softness at all. Courage is about potentially going down a path others wouldn't, or making decisions that go against the flow. And courage is about accepting that you will get it wrong from time to time, and understanding that perfection is actually not, in my view, ever been delivered by anybody. There is not a perfect CEO or not a perfect company. And so it's accepting that. And so courage means so much along those lines as well. And, courage is something you accept as a CEO that you need to demonstrate from time to time.
Yeah.
And having the courage to do hard things, decisions, or roll your sleeves up and do something that needs to show what you're doing in the face of a major challenge. The Zelensky, the president of the Ukraine right now, I think is a living, breathing, live example of courage. He's rolled his sleeves up. He's refusing to leave. He's been offered asylum. He's, standing up in the face of what's happening. And I think that is currently the public face of courage.
It's remarkable, isn't it? The courage that, and I put a post about him the other day. He's kind of like, courage around, if you think about a lion, right, it's courageous. He's kind of really trying to protect his pride of people, right? He's got this incredible, he's got these people that he's taking care of, and he's standing up as a courageous lion to go, I need to protect you all. You're my, you're part of my tribe and my pride. Like I need to, so it's remarkable seeing that. But I also think, which I think I really love about what you stand for and who you are, particularly around the courage you've demonstrated in the last few years, that you've been so great and gracious in your vulnerability as well. That's what I think has been like, I think people have really admired that about your courageous leadership.
Yeah. Well, I think vulnerability is a big part of it. And, I grew up in an era where men generally weren't encouraged to be vulnerable at all. And by the way, I completely agree with your acknowledgement of the female challenge of, not faking it till you make it like we do, and not being as courageous or as cocky as men. So I see that quite a bit as well. And I'm also encouraging a lot of the women that have worked for me in my life to be, a bit more forthright.
Yeah, I've heard that actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So because, there's some amazing, it's not a gender thing now. There's amazing potential in leadership coming through in all the companies I've seen. So, yeah. So look, it is incredibly important to be courageous, and vulnerable at the same time is important as well. And because that is this pretense of perfection is, I think, something that causes anxiety and stress, because you do, first of all, you don't own up to it. You do bottle it up, and it can get to you. And I think vulnerability is something that people relate to, and it makes all leaders a little more human when you can open up and be vulnerable. Now, in good cultures where it's accepted and embraced, it is more free flowing, and in cultures where it's sort of frowned upon, I think you'd have higher levels of anxiety and stress just as a result of that.
Really true. Really true. That's why having those cultures and workplaces that really embrace psychological safety, and people having that, being able to have that, show that vulnerability, make mistakes, speak up without any ramifications, or that's really important.
Yes.
What skills do you think leaders lead today? Like, what are you seeing as some of the skills that leaders, for it's a different world, right? What sort of skills do you think leaders need today?
So there are a lot of different skills leaders need, but I think first of all, this is not necessarily a skill per se, but just an understanding of the impact of what you do and say, and what people see you do. I think that's incredibly important. A key skill or tool for me is calmness, and it's taken a lot of practice to remain calm under pressure. But when, one thing I've really challenged myself to do is, the tougher it gets, the calmer I need to be. And decision making is far more credible when you are making it from a non-emotional position of calmness. Either anger or getting overly stimulated for whatever reason can, that's that whole brain thing. It takes you into the wrong sphere of thinking, can have you make decisions under an emotional load, and that's not good. So staying calm is very, very important. Learning how to listen to understand and support, as opposed to listen to judge and criticize, very important. And allowing people to freely share a view is very important as well. So those skills are super important. My practice of leadership is not overly complicated either. So I think simplicity is incredibly important. And we've just been through the whole process of our purpose and culture statement and our strategy. And it won't surprise you, after having just made that comment, that the first value we now have at Pacific National is make it simple. We've tended to overcomplicate it, get too technical. And we do need people that are in the technical detail, but we need, in terms of consistency and clarity, we need simplicity as well. So those tools are very, very important. I think I lean on tools as well. One of the personal development tools is just to read a lot. So you mentioned your great book, First Comes Courage. There's a whole series of great leadership books out there that, I think just the continuity of doing it is super important for any leader. I'd say the single biggest thing that I've done in my life is read and learn through others' examples. So, and there's some excellent.
Do you have any favourite books?
Yeah, I do. One of my go-to favourites, I've got to say yours, Sonia, of course.
No. Yeah, mine's good, but I know there's some exceptions.
There's some excellent ones. Yeah.
I'm very open to the fact mine is there's lots of great leadership books out there. I'm actually trying to write one at the moment. So anyway, but I'd love to know your favorite.
My go-to favourite, and there's plenty of others, but my go-to favourite, for the sheer point I'm making about simplicity, is How to Become a Great Boss by Jeffrey Fox. It's just super, super simple, easy to follow. And say to the people that are in leadership positions that work for me, if you do nothing else, read that book.
Okay, great.
Put it in place. Yeah. And so one of the key takeaways that sticks with me, and has forever since I read that book, is that good leaders don't fear competence around them. They actually support their journey with competence. And bad leaders actually fear competence and see it as a threat and kill off the threat. And so you need to learn, in order to get into that space, to give credit to those that work for you. Don't take the credit. You need to back them for their expertise in decision making. The people that work for me directly in their individual lines know so much more about and are better at what they do into their line than I would be. And I feel much more natural in the CEO space than when I was a line leader. So this book, Jeffrey Fox says, don't fear competence. In fact, you need to embrace it. And the best leaders in the world embrace that competence and don't need to be more right or more smart than the people they get around them.
All right, I'm definitely going to check that book out. Okay, that sounds amazing. Any others? Or is that your...
There's a few others as well. There's the go-to personal one as well for me was, and it's an old book. It's a timeless book. It's the Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah.
And just on a personal basis, I changed so much after having read that book. And but it's one book that I've read time and time and time again, because it's like learning a language. If you read the words and you just say it once, it doesn't become a habit. So that is a book that I've had 3 or 4 copies in my life because I ruined them reading them over and over and over again. But that's a very, very good book. It's just got the principles of how to be good at relationships. And in the early days, I used to blame others for bad relationships I was in, and I say this to my team as well now. In every relationship, to get better, someone's got to be the adult. It's probably not the best way to describe it, but the common denominator in my life, every poor or average relationship I've ever had, is me. So I know, I can contribute, and now I turn up to relationships behaving the way that I intend to behave, no matter how I'm responded to, and I can feel good about knowing that I've done what I needed to make that relationship a good one. And that was really good lessons out of the Dale Carnegie book.
Excellent. Yeah, that is an excellent book. So it's good that you're really aware about. It's very easy for us to kind of externally blame And it's like, well, hang on, how am I contributing to this as well? Like, it's not all, Emma said, can you please add those books to the chat for us? I will definitely do that after this because I've written them down. So I promise Emma I'll do that. So thank you. Also, what advice would you give to leaders listening today? Like, you've got a number of people here listening. What advice would you give them?
So let the guard down and be open to your vulnerabilities and your development areas. And if that's not a safe space to be directly to your boss, find somebody where you can, go into that space as well. Read a lot. Even though a bad boss can make the atmosphere ordinary and frustrating, I say to people, lead the right way despite how you are led. And because quite often people will say, I know I could be a better leader, but my boss is doing this to me, so I'm passing it down. And, in some ways, being an umbrella to that stuff is leadership.
Yeah, I always say to people, like, kind of be the stopgap or the block. Like, you have to be the change or be the best version of yourself that you want to see, right? Because we can't keep saying, well, they're operating like that. So it's like, well, no, you've got your own circle of influence, right? So you lead the way that you want to see, to be led. So, all right, I know I've taken up more of your time than I expected. So, because I could talk to you all day about leadership, and because obviously I just really admire you and your leadership. Is there anything else that you'd love to kind of say? And I'm very excited about looking at the new Pacific National's culture statement, your purpose and vision. I'm really looking forward to seeing that because I know it would be just wonderful. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to everyone that's kind of on here today, especially like to give anyone hope or inspiration for 2022? Because I know that whether it's COVID or floods, or what's going on in Ukraine, we're just talking about that offline around, and also, talking about that today around courage. Is there anything else that you'd like to say?
Yeah, and thanks for the opportunity, Sonia. Look, I think there's a lot to look forward to. I think if we've learnt anything through the raft of challenges and they've just kept coming that have been thrown at us, is that we are resilient, and things, the fear of the unknown or fear of something that hasn't happened has sort of transpired in a way to prove that we can get through, some of the most unbelievable circumstances and come through the other side. And, there is a lot to look forward to, and life is going to get back to, close to what we know as normal. And everyone's gotten through and survived and found ways to thrive in other ways. And I think that's proven to us that we are resilient. And I think that lesson is one we should grab. And there's been lots of changes to the way we do business. I think, leaders have had to learn to trust so much more because of the pandemic. And I think that's proven that it is actually okay to trust people and hold them to account. But, I think we do have a lot to look forward to. I think positive rhetoric is something that I get sort of made fun of because people think I'm like the Ted Lasso of leadership, and sometimes I'm overly optimistic. But I really am looking forward to coming out of this because of the lessons we've learnt, and people who are listening have a lot to look forward to in what's coming.
I agree. I really agree. I think that we are so much more courageous than we give ourselves credit for. And if we can, and we've built that courage muscle, particularly so many of us over the last few years. So, when things, and things are going to get so much better, they are. And we've built that muscle, right? And we've definitely also built the care and kindness muscle. I've seen a lot more kindness and care come out if we can really keep focusing on being great leaders ourselves and making our difference. We can leave a great legacy. So thank you so much for I cannot wait to hear you speak on the 29th of July. So if you haven't bought your ticket yet, make sure you do, because you'll be listening and hearing from Paul and Christine Holgate and some other incredible speakers on the day. It was just such an honour spending 35 minutes with you today. So thank you so much.
No, thanks for the opportunity. I love talking about it, and well done to you for what you're doing, Sonia. I think it needs to be shouted about a lot more, and you're really bringing a spotlight to it. So well done.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. Yeah, it's leadership isn't easy, and definitely there's been challenges along the way and adversity and things, but you know what, together, I think together, and this is what it's been amazing, particularly even with writing about you and having you involved in the conference and things, that people like you, if we can all together, shine a light on this and lead the way, and if we can inspire others to be more and do more, watch out, world, like we can really make a difference. So thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks again, Sonia.
Take care. Bye. Stay safe. Thanks. Bye.